Hello, guys, to the second part of this audiobook series covering now Chapter 1. Now, to before we get right into this, just want to give some the typical beginning stuff. As always, go support the original story. All the links for the story, the two authors, and the Tvtropes page, if you want to check that out, are all in the description. And if you haven't watched the previous part, the prologue, log, or I guess the first chapter, go watch that. Or if not, you just want to watch it from chapter 1, perfectly fine. I find is honestly the best place to start, anyways, in my opinion. The prologue is good, but chapter 1 is excellent. This is really where the story gets kicking. And also, quick thing to mention: this is a great time to join the story. Sorry, weird phrasing. To start reading the story because a new update just got posted just a little bit ago, half hour at most. Probably gonna go read that once I'm done with this recording I'm doing for all you guys. But now, as to not make this opening nearly as long as my as the prologue's opening, let's just get started. Sorry, just trying to clear my throat because I'm going to try to speak up a little because I think I was watching it over just to make sure the video was good, and I noticed it was kind of quiet. Don't know if it's just me, but we will try because dang it, I am nothing if not someone who improves. Chapter 1: Selling Xeno souls for fun and profit. I should go back to the beginning. Not to the very beginning of my tale, perhaps, but back to when it completely changed in ways I doubt even Terra could have foreseen. Back to the moment when I was damned. There has been much debate on whether Ciaphas is truly damned, despite being a demon prince. At the time I was stationed with the Valhallan 12th Artillery Regiment. The regiment is declared of heresy or the taint of chaos by Lord Inquisitor Kara Mazov's own personal inspection. A cozy position far from the front lines, or so I had hoped, when I did everything I could to get assigned there after the Skola finally tired of me and cut me loose. My first appointment resulted in me gaining a rather unfounded reputation as a hero, having been forced to confront a large number of Tyranids that I had been running away from, my near death, and ensuring victory, along with my opinion that shooting troops for minor infractions only made you die heroic deaths suspiciously far away from the front lines, had turned me something into an idol of the regiment, as well as winning me an aid and loyal companion in the form of Jurgen. Or, to put it bluntly, they're lynched by their troops for killing them for no reason. Yeah. While this new status and popularity had made it far less likely that I would be shot in my sleep, it also had the negative effect of me being forced to lead from the front, and risking my then mortal life more than any artillery soldier would be expected to. After all, once you had a reputation as a hero, you had to maintain the facade, and if any of the troops I served with came to realize the truth, then perhaps their trigger fingers would start getting itchy. Thus, whenever I found myself in a situation where any sane commissar would have pointed their pistol at the nearest guardsman and demanded they go die gloriously for the Emperor while they themselves remained in the rear, I was forced to never risk aiding the men. Never, I was forced to never ask of the men anything that I wouldn't do myself. After all, I was Ciaphas Cain, the regimental hero, who genuinely cared for the common trooper and would be right there beside them. Or at least that's the impression I wanted them to have. This continuing act of lies and fabrication snowballed into an ever growing reputation among the men, which brought me back to here, to the beginning of my story, and the end of the man I had been, to the place where I first encountered and was touched by the powers of chaos, where I was changed, to Slockenberg. At the time, it was a little known and unimportant resort world, with the most notable thing about it being how the planetary governor would suddenly become abundantly generous with free vacations for the nearest ranking adepts of the administratum whenever Slockenberg's imperial tithe came due. Mhm. Nowadays, the biggest emperor bars use it as a major cardinal world, and his holy psychopaths with firearms for mass murder of innocents use. I'll just Nowadays, the biggest emperor bottlers used as a major cardinal rule, and his holy psychopaths of firearms for mass slaughter of innocents. Not the most kind term for his Majesty's most holy Inquisition, but also not the most inaccurate. Use it as a place to conduct insane experiments that more often than not result in me having to tell them to cut that grok shit out. As the one who struck the bargain, Cain is the only demon able to manifest upon the planet. As many of my more insane colleagues' experiments usually would result in demons everywhere, Cain ends up getting summoned, much to his annoyance. Also, other things. Back to my story and first time in that miserable little world. It was in a civil war between various chaos factions. At the time, it was thought that the only combatants were the cunning disciples of at the time it was thought that the only combatants were the cunning disciples of Zenich and the disgusting followers of Nurgle. These factions and varied cults had united just long enough to overthrow the governor, which one I'd been told was more of a service to the Imperium than a death service. Then, to absolutely no one's surprise, they turned on each other. Even some of the Nietzschean cults had turned on other cults dedicated to the Dark God, which is typical of that lot. Currently, the planet was under the control of now General Malone, Malone, a PDF commander who had used the uprising to purge the military of the former governor's inbred and completely incompetent family members and hanger-ons, and seized control after using a significant amount of last fire to kill off the rest of the governor's family when they resisted arrest. Rather than doing something foolish like declaring Slockenberg's independence, he had then quite sensibly announced his loyalty to the throne, and also declared his very happy willingness to send the wider Imperium create proof of the former ruling Imperium's corruption. Many in the various sub-branches of the Inquisition are of the opinion that now Governor Malone was Many in the various sub-branches of the Inquisition are of the opinion that now General Maloney was at one point touched by Corn, but had turned that malignant power towards fighting for justice. Considering the PDF showed signs of Cornite worship in the early phases, this may have been the case. Recent experiments have shown that while it is possible to be a servant of both the Emperor and the Blood God, it is an extremely delicate balance, kept only by exercises that are on par with Astrade's training in the wanton slaughter of unjust nobility. On another note, I've heard that the Slockenberg 8th, 18th, and 88th Liberty regiments have successfully removed another corrupt governor who was bribing the local administratum to ignore missed tithes. Thus, the 12th and other varied regiments of the Imperial Guard had been deployed to restore order and crush the remaining Chaos worshippers on Slockenberg. After a few weeks of the regiment being fully situated and ready to rain hell down on upon the Imperium's foes, myself and a couple of the younger troopers, as well as Jurgen, of course, that he never left my side unless ordered to, had gone to scout for the enemy in the cities. In other words, I was flagrantly using my authority to allow ourselves a bit of reprieve from the boredom. It was a nice enough city, I suppose, though as a hive boy, I always had trouble seeing such places as little more than overgrown towns. I had long since run out of casinos that would accept me and my luck at various games of chance, and the last of the brothels had been closed with extreme prejudice after the discovery of how exactly they got their entertainment. If if I'd had doubts about General Maloney's actions in removing the previous administration, they were dashed after that, and the liberation of countless innocents from the prisons and black sites once the PDF had defeated the former governor's personal guard. So we commandeered a salamander scout vehicle and were driving through the streets filled with people, both hopeful for a better future than that which they had known, while still anxious over the ongoing conflict that engulfed their world. We eventually came to a stop at a small, out of the way shop, where one of the vendors there was selling oddities and baubles, looted from the previous governor's supplies and stashes of ill gotten wealth. As I browsed idly while deciding rather not to report the shop for dealing in stolen goods, I noticed something that caught my attention and set my palms to itching. It was a perfectly smooth and polished stone, blacker than the deepest depths of the void, where starlight refused to shine, and nearly pulsating with hatred even to my senses. I glanced over, noticing that Jurgen was on the other side of the shop, gawking at a risque statue of what I would later learn was one of the unlamented former governor's favorite mistresses. The only reason she retained her life and liberty and the statue hadn't been smashed like so many others were during Maloney's purge was due to the fact that it had been discovered that her position wasn't entirely willing. Turning back to the obviously malevolent gem, my first instinct was to confiscate it. I had built a reputation of fairness and treating the civilians well, so I approached the seller, who wore a ridiculously large hat that covered much of his face. He also seemed fond of clown makeup. In all honesty, I find that stone hadn't been enough then that definitely should have been the first hit that something was up here. Cain was not a member of the Ordes Xeno, so he was not aware of the common ways Xenos infiltrate human society. However, I probably would have fallen for it too. Welcome to the Laughing Shop. Where we are determined to put a smile on all of our customers' faces. The owner exclaimed as I came to stand before his register, grinning at me from ear to ear. It was honestly unnerving. The clown makeup reminded me of a corpse which had had its mouth mutilated. Passing over my obvious discomfort, and eyes sparkling with I'd thought to be eagerness at making a sale. Odd fellow who I'd idly noticed was just as tall as myself, continued. I see you have your eye on the Darkstone. The Darkstone? I asked, somehow hearing the capitalization in the name. It certainly sounded appropriately ominous for such an artifact. The seller nodded rapidly, half flopping back and forth and threatening to fall forwards to cover his eyes. It was that ridiculously oversized. Oh, indeed. According to legend, it houses a being of great evil, he replied, grin whining even further as he leaned in to whisper to me, "And not a human soul either, but a vile Xenos one." Now that certainly caught my attention even more firmly, and I had already been focused heavily on the oddness of the black gemstone. We had been briefly taught about the Eldar race in our classes on the enemies of the Imperium, so I knew what this was now. A spirit stone. I hadn't identified it before, because I had never even heard a rumor of a black spirit stone. To my understanding at the time, most were various shades of red, blue, green, or other bright colors. How how do you acquire such an artifact? I inquired, hoping that my shock at this disclosure wasn't showing. "I have my ways," the seller replied cryptically, his grin gaining a mysterious edge to it. I got the feeling that the man was eternally laughing at me. I wouldn't realize how true that was until later. For now my curiosity was mistakenly more taken by the Darkstone than by its seller. "Why is it black?" I asked curiously, still young enough that I didn't yet know that some things shouldn't be wondered about. "I told you, it houses a truly dark and evil soul." The merchant's face fell from its unnerving grin for the first time during our encounter, and for the briefest of moments I caught a look of pure, unbridled hatred on his face as he looked to the stone. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, before I could be sure of what I had seen. The grin was back with a rueful air of nonchalance. Nonchalance. "Don't know why the other had it, but he did," he said, shrugging with no sign of concern for having such a potentially dangerous artifact in his possession. I realized then that I had to take this away from the man, lest he or some other customer carelessly unleash the spirit within the stone. The last thing I needed was the ghosts of long-dead Xenos possessing random civilians, or something like that. "I'll buy it. How much?" The smile turned predatory and considering, which should have been my second or third warning, but at the time I took it to be simple greed on his behalf. "Oh, for you, my friend. How about—" He then rattled off a price that made me think in that moment that he wasn't aware of what he actually had here. Like the idiot I am, I purchased it with no reluctance, since my pay was just sitting there with no place willing to let me try my hand at cards or other games of chance. I slid it firmly into one of my coat pockets. I walked away with measured steps and returned to my little entourage, who er, were mostly on the part of the two young troopers, since most people largely ignore Jurgen, flirting with an attractive seller of various odds and ends. The next stall over. "Who's that, sir?" Jurgen asked as I got back to him. "Honestly, I have no idea," I admitted, shrugging. I decided that I'd turn in the so-called Darkstone the next day. Today was to be a day of relaxation, fun, and little to no worries for myself and my compatriots. If I'd only known how wrong I was, I'd have gone back to the regiment immediately, called the Inquisition myself, and forced Colonel Mastru to hold on to my regent personage until the Emperor's pet psychopaths arrived. I suppose for the planet's sake, it was good that I didn't, but I had no idea at the time the price I would pay for my day of leisure. Thus, I knowingly sealed my fate as we continued on our errands. Next item on our meandering agenda was to take our leave of the city and head to an observation post about a dozen kilometers out in the boonies. However, we soon had the misfortune of coming across some Nurgle cultists on the road. While a short work to mop them up, they had left the roads impassable to seemingly stymie the Imperial advance. So we had no choice but to go into the forest, which had barely enough clearance between the trees to let the salamander pass through. It was a long and bumpy haul that made me curse my luck and how yet again what was supposed to be a be a make work assignment to give us day of ease was turning into increasingly hard and complicated work. I had to stop several times so I could consult our map and compass to assure that we weren't lost, still headed in the general direction to our observer station. However, before we would have eventually been able to return to the road, we came across an unexpected sign of civilization, that being a really, really large stone wall. I checked the map again. I saw nothing on it concerning structures in this area of the woodlands. Lands. Why is this in the middle of nowhere? Jordan asked blankly, looking up at the tastefully chiseled wall. Loggers' outpost? One of the men, Gunner Mulens, Mulens said with an uncaring shrug. I wish I could accept that and move on. The sun had set my palms to itching again. My aide voiced my unspoken concerns about our present mystery, noting how Mulens's theory didn't fit. Then why would it be so high? Jurgen responded with befuddlement, still looking upwards towards where the creeping vines ascended the wooden lat- uh, lattice work against the smooth rock. I'm pretty sure this isn't a fortification. Too fancy. I knew that most probably. I knew that most I knew that most probably. We just come across some of the now bite me. Sorry, my cat's just getting a little rowdy. I knew that I knew that most probably. We had just come across some out of the way estate for the tourists or other nobility. I haven't lived this long by taking chances or ignoring my finely told sense of paranoia. Keep weapons at the ready, I ordered, putting words to action as I unholstered my last pistol. Hopefully these aren't Nergalite or Zenitian cultists. I was right in my hopes, of course. Literally the worst way possible. A feminine scream rang out through the dense greenery, and all of us turned rapidly to the sound. Come on! Mullens shouted eagerly, raising his weapon and charging off in the direction of the crowd of distress like a rocks in heat, leading us straight into the likely danger, no doubt. I, of course, had to follow him to maintain my reputation as a man of action. The other trooper, Gunner Greer, Greer, followed after his friend, and faithful Jurgen, of course, followed after me, as when we dashed towards the sound of the disturbance. We shrieked out of the tree line with a young woman, woman, dressed in torn clothing that looked like it had been a risque nightgown before her panicked flight through the woods. Help! She begged desperately, leaping to my arms as her own wound around the back of my neck, causing me to nearly tumble at the nearly added weight. I would have loved to help such a lovely creature, that was held at bay by at least 50 kilograms of panicking female. While she was incredibly attractive, what more urgently caught my immediate attention was more of those literally rotten Nurgle soldiers stumbling into a small clearing in pursuit. My free hand, I aimed and fired my las pistol, taking one out cleanly through the roomy eye socket. That snapped Mullens and Greer out of their stupor at seeing such a lovely young woman in such a state of near undress, and they opened fire on the forces of chaos coming at us. The attacking cultists were tough and could take a beating without any signs of pain, but they came right at us with no plan or return fire. It was only a couple of moments before their filthy carcasses were sprawled out on the forest floor, finally expiring. Jurgen strode forward to put additional last bolts through their heads, just to be certain. And with that silence returned, save for the relieved gasps and sobs of my passenger, who was beginning to squirm against me in ways that no lady of breeding should. I found both embarrassing and stimulating, much to Mulenz's and Greer's jealousy. Had I known more about her then, I'd have never let her get that close. Christabel? Another feminine voice, one which sounded like the feeling of bathing in chocolate while being hand-fed tiny delicacies fit for a high lord's table, rang out with the clarity of a bell. Another woman, this one slightly older than the one clinging to me, whose mature beauty left the now named Christabel looking slightly plain in comparison, raced out of the building from an entrance that was previously disguised by clever placement of the plant life. Around her were at least a dozen or more women closer in age to Christabel than this obvious matrion, each one slightly less beautiful than the one speaking, but still very easy on the eyes. Through this veritable buffet of womanly charms, I never missed the fact that my palms were still itching, despite the fact that the apparent danger had passed. Something was up here, but I just couldn't see it yet. "Oh, thank you!" the mature woman cried out enticingly upon noticing us. The other girls gathered around the others with me, bombarding them with attention and tittering flattery. Even Jurgen, Greer, and Mullens, being reasonably fit young men, seemed completely taken by the current company, but not my aid. His eyes were full of both confusion and suspicion. So were mine, for that matter. No one ever got that close to Jurgen unless they had to, especially not beautiful women. As Jurgen is a blank, the normal reaction to those not a psyker is at best total apathy, at worst murderous hatred. His appearance and smell, well, do not help matters. I caught his eyes, and he seemed pleased I was acting stoically amidst this charm offense, covertly mouthing the words, "Talk later," towards me. I nodded once, slightly so it looked like I was merely inclining my head for a moment. Then my attention went back to the oldest of these breathtaking women, including some manner of authority over the others, with how they clustered around her like honey-bearing insects around a queen. "Who might you be?" I asked with all the professional charm I could pull off. She smiled charmingly at me. Instantly I wanted to relax my guard around her and let my mind be at ease. For all of a moment before my better instincts kicked in. Deep within my coat pocket, I can feel the dark stone warming up enough that I can feel it for at least 2 layers of sturdy clothing, concerning by a more immediate thing to focus on than Xeno's artifacts. My name is Emilie Dubois. Dubois, I think. Sultry yet refined voice like crushed velvet in my ears, as she smiled even more enchantedly at me, her captivating eyes sweeping over my form. Headmistress, headmistress here at my boarding school, and guardian for these young ladies. And you are? Ciaphas Cain, Imperial Commissar, attached to the 12th Valhallan Artillery Regiment, I replied, honestly, with as much gravitas as I could muster of a barely adult woman in tattered clothing still clinging to me, inclining my head politely, as I couldn't exactly bow or salute like this. Head, head, Headmistress Dubois. Sorry, try this again. Inclining my head politely, as I couldn't exactly bow or salute like this. Headmistress Dubois seemed to see my predicament, as she gently coaxed her charge off of me before sending Christabel inside, with a few of the other girls not busy fawning over the troopers. Our damsel in distress tended and seen to, she turned back to me with concern radiating from her expression. The Imperial Guard are those things. She looked at the already decaying Nergalite corpses with obvious disgust. Really that bad? Worse, I replied gravely, hoping to impart the seriousness of the situation upon her. I suppose that I succeeded, as she nodded sharply and gestured us all towards the hidden entrance. And we shouldn't waste a moment. Follow me. We'll let you stay the night. She smiled again, and once more I could feel my guard begging to be let down, while the darkstone turned near, burning with heat from within my uniform. After all, she continued breezily as she took me by the arm and pulled me gently towards the door, while her charges likewise guided my companions along. It's the best we can do. With that declaration led us away to her lair, away to the damnation of us all, save Jurgen, of course. The deceptively charming little piece of my damnation was called the St. Trinia Academy for the Daughters of Gentlefolk, all girls' boarding school set away from the troubles and vices of the city. Evidently, it was designed for young ladies who had just reached their age of maturity, and was supposed to teach them the skills necessary for a young woman of breeding and class to have. Frankly, I found it rather droll, but the surroundings and company were certainly pleasant, perhaps a bit too pleasant, as my sense of paranoia was all but screaming at me. The two young troopers were more than happy to join the ladies for their evening repast, while to also take tempted to also partake of the bountiful table they showed us to. I was well aware of the fact that my palms were itching. I long associated itchy palms as a sign that there was danger I wasn't fully aware of yet, so refused to let my guard down. It was heartening to realize I wasn't alone in my suspicions, as Jurgen's eyes kept darting around warily, with hand kept within easy reach of his las gun. Amelia paid no attention to him, as focused as she was on me. The other women were too inexperienced to see Jurgen's watchfulness anything other than shy standoffishness. The matrion of the academy gently cajoled, cajoled and tried to persuade me to sit with them. Her inviting lips turned in a mouth of a moue of disappointment. Please, Commissar Cain. I call you Caiaphas? I assure you, my staff puts on only the finest meals. Why, I dare say it embodies perfection itself. The look of mild dismay turned then into a then to a seductive smile, sparkling eyes fluttering at me. I assure you, if you join me, you won't be left waiting. Oh, she was good. The two could play the game of Varl sparring. I have a fair talent for it. For I have a fair talent for getting through tricky conversations with my reputation, if not always my safety, intact. I returned her smile with a regretful one of my own. Truly, Miss Dubois, you need to work so hard to sell the skills of your chefs. A bit of truth and flattery to throw an opponent off guard never hurt. It was the truth. Indeed, the scent alone wafting from the heaping platters full of an excess of foodstuffs was leaving my mouth watering. I decided to give her a small victory, followed by a bit of the blunt yet charming soldier, to let her think she had disarmed me. Amy Please me greatly to have you call me Caiaphas. I may call you Emily." As she smiled in delight, I continued, seeking to dazzle her with the soldier act so that she'd continue to underestimate me in my state of alert. I'd be a damn fool to pass this feast up with the rations back in the regiment. Every day of me a soldier gets to eat so well with such a lovely company. Now I turned my lips down to a sadden frown, eyes full of regret and hopes that I wasn't causing offense. Of course, I can't help but feel like we're taking advantage of you here. Furthermore, I have a duty to return to our post. However, there, the bait was out, and she took it. Eyes focused on me, licking her lips and adjusting herself in her seat in a manner I found most pleasing. She echoed my leading statement. However, I smiled grandly, as if I had come to my decision that laid my qualms to rest. However, the hour was growing late. The hour is growing late. I suppose it wouldn't do to leave you ladies undefended if more of those miscreants from earlier came looking for their fellows. Besides, it would be rude to scorn such generous hospitality. Please, give me a few moments to discuss our accommodations with my aides so we don't put you out. And after revolting that we've been delayed till morning, I'd be most pleased to take you up on your offer. Amelia returned my smile and inclined her head, showing she'd indulge me. Why wouldn't she? As far as she was concerned, she'd won a little contest of words and belief oath. She was happy to leave her with. For courtly bow after I stood, I gestured to Jurgen, and the two of us departed la- the two of us departed the lavish dining room, going to one of these side halls where my instinct insisted we weren't being observed. As soon as I was satisfied that we'd remain unheard, I turned to my malodorous aide, who promptly leaned in with an urgent whisper. "You feel it too, sir?" he asked. I nodded firmly, eyes narrowed. "Something is definitely not right here," I muttered. "That attack earlier. They seemed surprised to see us, but not the girl, Crucible, as if the Nurglets were after this place in particular, and as insane as heretics are, wouldn't use that many men for an undefended group of schoolgirls when there's still fighting going on elsewhere." Jurgen nodded rapidly in agreement, his traditional Valhallan cap flopping about his ears as he added his own observations to mine. "There's the way the other troops are acting. It's too much, sir. That and the ladies. They're acting nice to me. More than nice. Like something out of a porno slate. No one likes me that much." My faithful companion said this with neither bitterness nor sorrow, but with factual conviction. He was never one to mope about his lot in life, content to do his duty, enjoy the simple things as he may. Jurgen was a rare gem for all his faults, and I told him as such. "You give yourself too little credit, Jurgen. But, as much as I'd like to say that it's just a case of no one giving you the chance you deserve yet, you're right. They throw themselves at you like hungry canids, canids with a juicy steak. Frack! Slowly the pieces were coming together. I didn't like the picture they were forming. Jurgen could sense my distress. His hand firmly on the butt of his lasgun and ready to commit violence on my say-so. "Sir," simple request for orders. Fortunately, I had them for him. "I don't think they're normal. Who knows what they could be up to out here? Isolated from prying eyes. Stall them while I investigate. Call it in if needed. Don't give them any indication that we're onto them," I instructed, before I started to race down the hallways, barely aware of Jurgen saluting and heading back into the dining room. I darted between the various rooms, investigating as quickly as I could, and prepared to offer my excuses if I stumbled upon anyone. There are no people in the rooms when I glance over them. Nobody in the halls. Amelia had mentioned staff. They couldn't all be congregated in the kitchen, could they? They kept looking through luxuriously furnished As I kept looking through luxuriously furnished room after room, I maintained a trained ear out to any signs of habitation. But the silence of tomb here, I could help but mutter under my breath, voicing my growing unease. Such a big place, so unpopulated. Truly, a mystery of the ages, a familiar voice mused, alerting me to the fact that despite hearing no footsteps or other sounds, I was no longer alone. I spun around with my last pistol drawn, only to pause upon seeing the face of that merchant from earlier in the day who'd sold me the Darkstone, though now missing his garish and his concealing hat, revealing elongated and decidedly pointed ears. Obvious Xeno continued to ramble, grinning as if he was telling some grand joke. Of course it'd say, 6 times the fun when you only get the clues, though I imagine Amelia won't like it. She's thirsty. You're not human, I stated obviously, as I backed up slowly and aimed my last pistol while reaching for my chainsword with the other hand. Indeed I am not, Ciaphas Cain, the alien replied with a mocking yet happy laugh. I was finally able to put a name to this brand of Xeno. Eldar. How by the God Emperor had I been fooled by a stupid hat of all things? I even bothered to change clothing or the hideous makeup. Seemingly unaware of my thoughts, I hoped as I recalled with increasing panic that all Eldar were psychics of some sort. My previously disguised alien acquaintance continued to prowl. I followed the path of the Rigorach. I followed the path of Kegarak, the laughing god, specifically the path of weaving shadow. Unfortunately, the only thing that the Order Xenos knows of this group is that they exist. He bowed as if he were an actor having just concluded a grand performance, hand held over where I assumed his heart was. Pleasure to meet you. With that introduction, the penny finally dropped into my stomach, and with it, my stomach. It was good that I had indulged at Emilia's table, as I doubt I'd been able to keep anything down with my increasing anxiety and dread. A harlequin? Here? I thought back to the lessons taught at the school about this particular band of Xenos. The best way I had heard them described were as malevolent clowns, following the last free god of the Eldar. They, like all Xenos, could not be trusted, for they always have their own goals. But there was one exception. If you were fighting alongside them against the forces of Slaanesh, they would not betray you. Oh, sometimes you wished they would, or you thought they did, but their plans always hurt Chaos more in the end than it did the Imperium. That and the fact that he was mentioning other things concerning the number 6, and immediately the school of Slaaneshi cult isn't. I asked him tensely, hands curling around my weapons but no longer aimed at the deadly jester. It all made sense now. Emilia's comedy is about perfection, the excess of unbelievably appetizing foods and drinks, the uncommon beauty of each and every woman we had seen here, along with their nearly scandalous manner of dress, the sheer decadence of the rooms in the academy. It all seems so very obvious now. He gave us a brief nod, his smile dying to a dour grimace. A particularly powerful one, for one so small, said grimly, and their leader has earned much favor from she who thirsts. Why do you call Slanesh she? I inquired curiously, even as my mind gibbered in panic over how I was going to get myself and the troopers, I suppose, out of the middle of a chaos cult's seat of power. The Harlequin shrugged. Then my question was of no consequence, tone flippant as he supplied an answer. I know of your species' habit of calling her the prince. It is as right as it is wrong. She is both and neither, but I am not a solitaire, a solitary. But as I am not a solitary, thank solitaire, I would much prefer we move on. Well, at least I wasn't the only one nervous at their proximity to a bunch of Slanesh worshippers. But that still begged the question of why he was here. In my experience, normal people, let alone enigmatic Xenos, always had some reason for what they did, no matter how twisted their logic might be. What do you want? I demanded, tired of his games. In response, he pointed at my coat pocket. I imagine you know what the Darkstone really is, he told me. I nodded, wishing he would get to the point. I also imagine that you're wondering why I gave a spirit stone to a human. I nodded again, because of course I'd wonder why he'd done that as soon as I knew he was an Eldar himself. They were famous for tearing apart entire human worlds in search of misplaced spirit stones, and fighting fiercely to recover them. Whatever his reason was for going against everything I knew his race stood for, I was expecting his hateful words as he glared at where the stone rested in my pocket. It's because that one deserves death. I beg your pardon? I beg your pardon? I asked, shocked right out of my growing tension and horror. Honestly, could anyone blame me for being taken aback? Having an Eldar suggest that an Eldar's soul deserved destruction was like Astrades from the Salamanders chapter, mentioning that they enjoyed breakfasts of human infants. The Harlequin continued, pointing a finger that I realized was shaking with rage at my pocket. The monster imprisoned in the Darkstone. He was the last emperor of the Eldar Empire of ancient times, when our race was ascendant, and the founder of the first pleasure cult. There was more venom in his voice than that contained any dozen creatures lurking within the dark jungles of Catachan. Just about why the Darkstone is black. It reflects the soul inside of it. The best way I can describe what he is to our people in ways a human will understand. It's like that you're holding the soul of Horus Lupercal alongside the soul of Abaddon, the spoiler, and 1,000 other traits to your Imperium. Well, that was certainly a chilling description. And I was suddenly all too aware of the Darkstone's weight within my coat, seemingly increasing how heavy it was now that I more fully understood just what it contained. Still, I didn't answer just what in the God Emperor's name this costume Xenos had given it to me. What? Okay. Still, that didn't answer just why in the God Emperor's name this costume Xenos had given it to me. And also, was it too late to ask for my money back? I ignored the latter question, keeping my focus on the Harlequin and hoping that nothing of import was occurring while I dealt with them. And why not smash the Darkstone and be done with all that sorry business? I asked, still genuinely curious why giving it to me was a better option than dealing with such a repugnant soul themselves. Fortunately, he was still in a sharing mood, taking the pose of a Schola lecturer as he explained. Were one of us to smash a spirit stone, no matter how vile the soul within is, we would be hunted down, nor can we use it to bargain. Well, that would explain how violent they got whenever a human threatened one of those seeming battles. However, I did not like the sound of that last bit. Bargain? I asked with trepidation. Bargaining I was good at, but bargaining with a soul, even a Xenos one, that outright smacked of the vilest heresy. The clown seemed to sense my thinking, as his gaze bored into mine, every word filled with a sense of weight and importance. She who thirsts desires that soul above all else, above the souls of your primarchs, above the soul of your emperor. That one cause of creation. That one escaped her grasp. With it you can call her directly and bargain. Why would I want to bargain with a warped god? I spat out in incredulous disgust. Seriously, what the frack? This? This was the plan of the cunning and wily Eldar? Give the damned Chaos God what he she wanted? The reputation of Kegor Axe followers as being insane, even by Xeno standards, was confirmed as far as I was concerned. A Harlequin, whose name I never got, just regained that malicious grin of amusement as he stepped back with languid grace. I'm sure you'll think of a reason, Ciaphas Cain. Good luck. With that final statement, he vanished into the wall, through some Xenos magic or other. Most likely a web portal or some sort of stealth field so he could sneak away. Of course, this left me in the dark, the last bits of sunlight having faded during our discussion. I just hoped that Jurgen had been able to sufficiently stall whatever the Slaneshi inhabitants of this place were up to. It was then that I heard footsteps, heavy booted ones moving at a run, hid behind a corner of the wall. Fearful that I immediately had clued into the fact that I wasn't ensnared by her deceitful charms and sent some sort of cult enforcers after me, but was relieved as a familiar odor assaulted me. Jurgen! I whispered urgently. He raced around the corner, almost wiping out from the rug slipping out beneath, and turned her face to me. Report! What's going on? The girls did something to the others, he told me, aiming his lasgun down the hallway and doing a quick sweep. Well, that explained why Lens and Greer weren't with him. I silently hoped we'd be able to save them as Jurgen continued to explain what I'd missed. I managed to throw it off and escape. They're heretics. Or Nash worshippers, I clarified. What are they planning? Jurgen's brow furrowed in thought, obviously taking my musing as a question he needed to answer. I I don't know, sir, but I think I saw where they went. Well, I couldn't very well return to the regiment without making at least an effort to save the two wayward troopers, or my reputation would be thoroughly shot, so I gave the order that would further pave the path to my own damnation. Show me. I followed Jurgen to the dorms, where after searching a bit in Emilia's room, since as the head of the cult, anything incriminating would obviously be in her quarters, I saw a wall slide out a ways. Op- I pushed it open with a grunt of effort, and revealed a secret passageway. Stay close to me, I told Jurgen, pistol in hand as we began to descend down through the tunnels. Should we call in an artillery bombardment? Should we call it an artillery bombardment? He asked me. It's a good suggestion. One that I'd be all too happy to take and rid myself of any responsibility for this mess. I thought for a bit, before shaking my head in the negative. We need to make sure that a bombardment would actually have an effect first, I briefly explained to him. Some chaos creatures would shrug off such an attack off like a Valhallan. Some chaos creatures would shrug such an attack off like a Valhallan with an ice shower. He nodded, as always dutifully accepting whatever I told him. We cautiously crept down the stairs. We were about a dozen steps down when a thought occurred to me. Jurgen, count the stairs, I told him. Sir? Sorry. Sir, you really you really could put an entire wealth of confusion and questioning into that single word. Into that single word. Just a hunch, I told him. He nodded, and I heard him mumble the numbers as we descended, carrying out my orders to his best abilities. Down, down, and down we went, deeper into the belly of this particularly attractive beast. As we did, I filled him in on the counter with the Xeno, the Darkstone, just how fast we were being in the center of a particularly strong Slaneshi cult. Finally, after several long minutes, we reached the last step. It came to be standing before a door coated in symbols of chaos. I turned to Jurgen, my gaze a silent question. 666, he told me with a nod. I may not see any significance in that number, but it filled me with ever increasing dread. Stepping forward and careful to stepping forward and careful to stepping forward and careful to not touch any of the heretical symbols, Jurgen placed ear to the door, concentrating. I hear something in there. Chanting, Miss Dubois talking. Something about immortality? An ascension ritual! I gasped. My greatest fears realized as I finally comprehended just how powerful this cult really was. Of course, my statement of realization just further befuddled my loyal aide, causing him to look at me in confusion. A what? A what? Wouldn't they have to be going higher up rather than down here? They're trying. Oh, what? If they're ascending, wouldn't they have to be going higher up rather than down here? They're trying to get their dark god's attention to ascend one of their own! I gathered hastily, raising a boot and slamming it against the door. I'd have normally sprinted straight up the steps and ordered the bombardment. The princess tended to laugh at such trivial things. As for how I knew of such heretical states of normally loyal imperial citizens who gained such knowledge tended to develop a bad case of bolt round to the face, there had been a radical inquisitor who filled in for the teachers one day and decided that we needed to know what exactly we were facing. Interesting these things to know is that of the members of Caiaphas' graduating class, none of them willingly fell to chaos. None of them willingly fell to chaos, and were more capable of sniffing out the foul worshippers of the great enemy. Lord Karamazov has since decreed knowledge of the four be more focused be Lord Karamazov has since decreed knowledge of the four be focused on more in the Schola. Lord Karamazov has since decreed knowledge of the four be focused on more in the Schola, and the number of commissars who have fallen to chaos has fallen by 4/5. The door was thrown open with a bang, and for a moment I was stunned by the sheer horror of what I was witnessing. There were at least 6 dozen cultists chanting, nearly nude melee dabbled in bloody ruins and painted on sigils standing in the middle. Mulens, Mulens and Greer were frozen next to the heretical headmistress, chained to a pillar where each of them tried to feebly thrash about despite their paralysis. I could hear them both crying out for the Emperor, plead for forgiveness and salvation. There's a pulse of unseen energy in one of the 6 rows of cultists keeled over with expressions of ecstasy carved onto their faces in a rictus grin. Holy Emperor, are they going to steal the souls of the planet? Jurgen whispered in shock. I wanted to laugh, but that was a very real possibility. At worst, the ritual would have only scoured half the planet. But it would have been enough to cause a warp portal, which would have had to be dealt with severely, if not by at least several entire chapters of Astralis, or intervention by the Grey Knights, then through exterminatus. More importantly, I was right there. If the range of the sucking of souls wasn't that size, I was still almost certainly in the crossfire. I fumbled for my coat pocket as the second wave died. The energy pulses were coming faster and faster. I knew I had little time. The sixth wave of energy. The troopers, along with the remaining line of cultists, while idly noted Christabel and monks, died as I raced away from Jurgen, just before the final pulse, just before the final culmination of this vile ritual. I did the stupidest thing I've ever done. Slanesh, I've come to bargain! I shouted at the top of my lungs, giving a proper commissarial bow for attention while holding the dark stone aloft. Millie was the only one left alive in the ritual chamber, besides myself and Jurgen, and she snapped her head to face me at my declaration. Her face quickly went from furious at the interruption to terrified at the possibility that I might actually be able to ruin her, her heretical efforts. The ritual paused, waves of excess energy wafting around, and then, "You have my attention, mortal." That one sentence almost drove me face down to the floor. As it was, it did drive me to my knees. I could do nothing but hold the stone in the air. Then I barely managed to recover my wits as a familiar odor grounded me, allowing me to stand once more. This odor seemed to be the physical manifestation of Jurgen's blank ability to keep yourself safe. Stay within the radius of the odor when dealing with chaos, but be sure to bring nose clips. I I offer you the Darkstone. In exchange, leave this planet alone for all time! I gasp out, praying this desperate gamble worked. There was complete silence, with Amelie standing frozen in disbelief, staring at me in utter horror. And then she screamed, not a cry of ecstasy, but of agony and denial, as what she sought was torn from her grasp. Her body contorted and flowed like putty, the corpses of her fellow maniacs following suit. From this came the form of another Eldar, this one clearly female. She was beautiful. There wasn't any other way to describe her. No way to describe the sheer, all-consuming horror of her majesty and sexual appeal. Jurgen's brow knit in consternation as he observed her. "Well, is that it?" she asked idly, walking towards me, but stopping a good 10 feet away. I knew that if I took a step forward, I was dead, my soul consumed by the terrible beauty before me. She seemed amused, as if the fate of the entire planet, all the souls on it, were a mere trifle. "I can offer you more. So much more." Only the knowledge that giving in would ensure my messy death, as she who thirsts literally sucked out my soul, kept me from accepting the promises of pleasures supernatural and sublime, stated within her words and tone. "Keep the planet from the others as well," I added, outstretched hands shaking, and sweat beading across my forehead at the insanity of what I was doing. "Make the warp here free of your taint, yours and the other Chaos Gods, of anything that might harm it." There was a curling smile, one that made me feel incredibly elated. Hmm, better. I'll actually be a bit of a challenge. Is a much more acceptable prize for such a prize. Agreed. I held out the Darkstone and tossed it to the avatar of excess. The perfectly proportioned figure caught it, and the casing dissolved. I heard the anguished scream of an Eldar soul cry out once, before a black mist came from the disintegrating spirit stone. Avatar opened her mouth. The mist poured into her, a very sensual moan that left me blushing. The Eldar rubbed her stomach in supreme satisfaction. "At last," she purred like a feline. I got the I got the cream and the weekend pass to a bird sanctuary. I will uphold the bargain. My presence will remain away from here, from the entire star system even, and I shall ensure, I shall ensure, I shall ensure that no others encroach upon it either. Even the Eldar will be safe from my thirst here, but only as long as it remains in the hands of the Imperium. Do be a dear let them know that, please. And maybe if they are humble enough and grovel before anathema, the anathema, and your Imperium, that protection will grow to cover wherever they go. With that, she strode back to the center of the ritual, moving her body essentially as an exotic dancer with all the pose of a high noble lady. A snap of seemingly dainty fingers that I knew could tear apart a titan. A tear in reality formed before her body, growing purple and with 6 points to the edges. Neither of us could take our eyes off of her as she stepped into the portal, and as soon as her form was fully within the warp rift, it collapsed. There was a full 10 seconds of silence when the ritual chamber turned tomb. "Do we call in the strike now?" Jurgen asked, seemingly unimpressed by the fact that we had just encountered a warp god, one of his holy majesty's most dangerous foes. "Yes, let's get it." Urgh! I clutched my sides and collapsed, rolling down the few steps I had started to climb. I faintly heard Jurgen call after me in distress, his hands on my shoulders and shaking me. The raw energy in the room sprang back and grew in great strength, even greater than it was at the climax of Emilia's abhorred ritual. I could hear sensuous laughter echoing within my mind and very soul. The sound belonged to the entity that had just seemingly departed. You swore! I spat in equal parts pain, panic, and anger. But, but then again, I had been dumb enough to bargain. I did, but there was one thing you didn't bargain for. Whisp- the voice, that voice whispered in malicious delight. And that is, I grunted out as my hands, clenched in spasm, opened over and over. What he really wanted. I do hope you enjoy it, Caiaphas. Pain unlike anything I had ever felt ripped through me. Every nerve was burning with sheer agony. I screamed. I screamed louder and louder. Eventually, my voice gave out, but the pain just wouldn't stop. I was determined to hold on for as long as I could. Jordan was near me. Hell, he was touching me, yet I could barely smell him. So overwhelmed were my senses. How long would this torture last? Seems that the length of time before giving in is directly related to the strength of the demon in question. If accurate, and Cain's statements about what Slaanesh said is true, we can infer that from the beginning, Cain was more powerful than a freshly made demon Primarch. Think the Emperor is on our side. Give in, and it'll be over, Slaanesh promised. I knew she was telling the truth, and my pain would end, and so much more would be offered to me. Unfortunately for the war poor, in this case, my will was made of adamantium, and I ignored her entirely. Emperor, protect your servant, I wheezed through grunted teeth. I refused to give in to the pain, knowing that to do so would be the end of me. My instinct for survival outweighed everything else, even the desire for the agony to cease. I looked at Jurgen with tear-filled eyes, his form blurry as darkness clawed at the edges of my vision. "Get me to the salamander!" I begged him. I felt myself being lifted like a sack of potatoes, found myself over his arm. Even that was so much more potent. Every nerve and bit of skin and muscle forced open to the fullness of sensation. The pain would not stop. And if I could have managed it and my survival skills allowed it, and if I could have managed it and my survival instincts allowed it, I might very well have turned my last pistol upon myself to end the agony. Each step I felt him take was like an eternity. Each jostle over his shoulder like slender daggers to my gut. But through it all, I refused to give in. I began to mumble prayers to him on Terra more fervently than I ever had in my entire life, willing to focus on my own voice rather than the call of the Lord. Fulgrim gave in before now. What are you? The voice of the Chaos God whispered in my mind. At once both incensed at my denial and overcome with curiosity at this new experience. I am a worshipper of him on Terra, I gritted out, as we at last exited the staircase and eventually the now abandoned academy. Jurgen raced to the salamander, keeping a firm grip on me. Upon seeing it, I gasped out and ordered him, knowing he could carry it out to the fullest. Call it in. Level it all. I panted out in pain, gasps and grunts. I only barely heard his acknowledgement as he placed me quickly on the scout vehicle's floor, the mesh plating pressing to my cheek. He jumped into the driver's seat and revved the engine before swerving away at speed, already on the Vox and calling in coordinates. That was the last I remembered, as I slammed against the bulkhead and passed out. The following is a similar account as the one above, but this one was given to me by Jurgen. As a blank, what he saw would be of unparalleled importance to gain further, unfiltered knowledge of our great enemy. The Commissar held his hand around the shiny black stone he had purchased from the trinket vendor, who I guess was actually a Xenos clown. That bit always confused me a bit. That part always confused me a bit. Still, it looked like the commissar knew what he was doing as he shouted, fit to scare the new recruits right out of their pants. Flanesh, I've come to bargain! He yelled into the air. Miss Emilie was the last one besides me and the commissar who was still up. She looked quite surprised to see him. I don't think she noticed me, what with my being a few paces away from the commissar, standing ready in the shadows of the spooky basement. Uh, um, I, I'm listening. The voice which answered the commissar was that of a young woman who sounded quite nervous. Commissar King was undoubtedly as shocked as I was that one of the dark powers should sound so uncertain and young. Standing there like a stunned orc as I moved closer to cover him. However, he recovered quickly. I, I offer you the Darkstone. In exchange, leave this planet alone. For all time, he got out. Then Miss Emilie began to contort and mush with the corpses a bit. I don't think she was expecting that bit, as she was screeching like a jilted lover. What came out of it was an Eldar woman. She looked rather pretty, I'll admit. Nothing too spectacular. What was surprising was how nervous and fidgety she was. Were I to describe it, would have to say that she looked like a shy virgin from a porno slate, unused to having a man see her. She was wearing slightly risque undergarments and was blushing up a storm. She hurried over, tripping over the first row of corpses, but recovering. She stopped about 10 feet from Commissar King. Didn't seem to notice me either. Still, I kept my lasgun trained on her in case she tried any funny business with the Commissar. Was what was that all you wanted for it? She asked, sweat dripping from the side of her brow and a look on her face like she'd eaten too much chef's surprise at the mess tent. Well, once asked during what chef's surprise was, his answer left me wanting to see a Magos bi- biologist logus. His I once asked Jurgen what chef's surprise was. His answer left me wanting to see a Magos bio biologist for a partial mind wipe and vowed to never set foot within the Imperial Guard mess tent if I could avoid it. No, no, that's not nearly enough for that meanie soul. I'd be so selfish if I took it just for that. And by this point, she is wing, wingling her hands and seemed to be on the verge of tears. Anything else? Keep the plans for the others as well, the commissar added, having a bit of trouble talking. I suppose he's embarrassed for the Eldar girl as I was. Make the warp here free of your tent, yours and the other chaos gods, everything that might harm it. The Eldar put a hand to her chin, deep in thought, though she struck me as being a bit simple. Jurgen seemed completely immune to the irony of the statement. Bless his soul. Well, gee, I mean, yeah, that seems more fair. It'll be a bit hard, though, making the Sea of Souls here like it was before the War in Heaven. But, but I think I can do it in exchange for the Dark Zone. Yeah, you have a deal, Mr. Cain. Further intelligence on the so-called War in Heaven is currently being sought after by all the various Ordos, the Ordo, those Xenos most of all. Then she did something to the shiny babble Commodore Cain was holding, and then she flirted up with some strange smoke like it was Tana. She really seemed happy and energized after that. Maybe strange smoke was like a recast to Eldar? The shy Eldar woman gave a little burp, seemingly further embarrassed. Oh, excuse me, but that was just so yummy. Don't worry, Mr. Cain, I'll keep my promise. I'll stay away from the planet. Wait, even better, I'll stay from the entire star system. That's a lot of space. I'll keep the three big jerks and all their nasty critters out of there. Like I said. She was beaming so earnestly, like she was as pleased as a juvie taking to go orc hunting as she continued to babble. Heck, I'm so happy right now that I'll even let the other off the hook here. Wait, but then they'd take it over. Better idea. The only sensible European controls it. But, but, but they'd still act like they'd own it. Well, if they lose a stick up their asses and work with your people in Revelation, then I'll let them go no matter where they are. Alright, I'll admit, when I found out who Revelation was, I freaked out. Just a tiny bit. Didn't really understand what she was talking about, about, but she sounded really, really bad at making deals, honestly. It was a little sad. That was what the traitor's Primarchs had fallen for? I'm not one to question the Emperor or his divine will. I wonder if he made his sons a bit on the slower side. Again, he seemed completely oblivious to the irony of making an observation like that. She then nervously backed off after saying her piece, looking at the commissar strangely, or running towards the center, holding her face in her hand as she furiously blushed. Some weird door covered in lace and glitter appeared before her, opening up as she tripped again and fell in while waving her arms about wildly. I hope she saw herself out all right once she was in what I guess was her bedroom. It looked like how the inside looked like a juvie girl's room would look like, I suppose. I'd never seen an Ordos male-less Inquisitor more gobsmacked than when they were told about it. I've never seen an Ordos Malleus Inquisitor more gobsmacked than when they were told this tidbit about what the paths of Slanesh looked like to Jurgen. Then I guess the Commodores went off from all the excitement and let down, because then he collapsed. He ordered me to get him to the salamander, so I carried him out of there. Then when I got him into it, Commodore Cain told him to call in the utility strike. So I did. So I got in and did so. While I was driving, I heard a thump. It was I had strapped the Commissar in. I checked on him and did so then, but I found a golden aquila around his neck. It struck me as odd, as while Commodore Cain is a faithful and loyal man, he didn't go with frivolous shows of faith, and I knew he didn't have something that fancy before. I noticed a note written in golden ink stuck to the aquila somehow. Maybe sticky tack. And figuring his correspondence with the commissar, I decided to ask his aid I shrieked to see if it was important enough to wake him from his nap. The note was simple and short. Big, bold handwriting, like whoever wrote it didn't know the meaning of being non-ostentatious. Ostentatious. After being After being mildly surprised at him knowing such a complicated word, I decided not to punish Jurgen for the accidental criticism directed at his most holy majesty. Jurgen could be a heretic if he gave him step-by-step instructions on how to do so, despite his unwavering loyalty to Cain. Wear this, and you will remain yourself. Short and simple enough instructions, I suppose. I kept it on him. The golden aquila, that is, not the note which I tucked in my pocket as the shells fell. The thought of parchment written upon by his own will and power, and with his own handwriting, going into Jurgen's pockets, it honestly made me cry. I've seen some of what he keeps stashed in there, and must reluctantly conclude that such an artifact is lost to us. I have to ask the commissar what happened when he woke up. Boy, was that a surprise. And finally, that's the end of chapter 1. Just give me a second. I just wanted to say, sir, that's the end of chapter 1, Stealing Xeno Souls for Funny Profit. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. This will be going up shortly. It will take me a minute because I accidentally ended the recording and I had to restart it again, so I'm going to have to recombine the videos because I don't want to just upload them separately. But I hope with this video and the prologue that you guys have gotten to that anyone who's anyone who's unfamiliar with the story has gotten a good start with it. That perhaps you'll stick around as I upload and make the series. And for anyone who is familiar with the story, well, I hope this was a nice little addition to the story. That maybe it was a cool way to go back to the story. Maybe some to listen. Uh, Maybe it was interesting to listen to, or maybe see it as cool, but maybe not that high quality, which is fair. Regardless, I hope anyone who's watched this and has gotten to this point has enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed it. Feel a bit tired, but I enjoy this, man. Anyways, again, go support the original story and authors. Links will be down in the description. And, well, just a quick thing to say about my upload schedule. Over my years on YouTube, I've basically never really had an upload schedule. I'm just really, really bad at following that. But I'll declare right here, right now, I will have an upload schedule for this series. Now, it will probably be at least a couple videos, at least a week. It's not going to be like one every day or anything. But the very, very least, I might do 1, 2, 3 every weekend or so. I expect you guys to try to hold me to that. Nah, I'm kidding. I'll hold myself to it. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you for chapter 2, where we'll get to see what happened when Cain wakes up and finds a personal Aquila from the Emperor himself, and learn what has now happened to him due to Flanesh, and see what this bargain he struck with her really entails. So, have a good time, guys. See you next time.